Hello, I'm James Criddon, the radio futurologist, and every week or so I write a newsletter all about radio and international trends and stuff, and you can't be bothered to read it, so you're listening to it instead, and that's a fine thing too. This is titled The BBC's Fight Against Stupid, and is the newsletter that I wrote on January the 21st. It's been a bit of a drowsy week for me this week because I had my booster jab earlier on in the week and I've been quite tired since. But let's wake up together with a small rant. The UK's current Conservative government are made up of possibly the worst set of dangerously dim-witted oxygen thieves that it's possible to imagine. And I thought I'd seen it all when one of them, the stupid Andrew Rossindale, stupidly stood up in the House of Commons, beflagged, and stupidly asked what could be done to get the BBC to play the national anthem at the end of every day's broadcasting. Sadly, stupid Andrew Rossindale, the Member of Parliament for Romford, which for all of its many faults surely doesn't deserve this bloke as their MP, doesn't realise that BBC Radio 4 ends every day's programming by playing the national anthem. Stupid Andrew Rossindale doesn't listen to BBC Radio 4, that much is clear. But he was asking the question to stupid Nadine Dorries, the UK Culture Secretary, who apparently replied that it was a good question. I thought nothing more of this until stupid Nadine Dorries, who erroneously thinks Channel 4 takes money from the government, it doesn't, and is amazed to learn that young people use YouTube. She stupidly announced in the stupid person's newspaper of choice, The Mail, on Sunday, that the BBC's licence fee would be frozen for 2 years and then this funding would be abolished altogether in 2027. Now, the way that the BBC is funded is by a household fee of $216 a year. And for that, you get 10 national TV channels, regional newsrooms, 10 national radio stations, more than 40 local radio stations, 10 national radio stations, yes, that's right, more than 40 local radio stations, and a variety of online services. It produces content in every spoken language in the UK, including Welsh and Gaelic. It does an especially fine job of producing commercially unviable content, and is one of the most well-regarded broadcasters in the world. And stupid Nadine Dorries would get rid of all of that for some stupid reason. Stupid Nadine Dorries has since changed her stupid mind, which rather highlights that she might just have been stupidly trying to make a big media smokescreen to cover up for her even stupider boss, stupid Boris Johnson, who's inexplicably still in a job at the time that I record this. The damage is done, of course. Other public broadcasters will now be at risk, since if it's good enough for the BBC, it's good enough for them in their country. And we can expect further threats to the ABC's funding in Australia, that of the CBC in Canada and in other countries, because stupid politicians will have listened to the stupid politicians in the UK. But could I recommend a piece of research from the Public Media Alliance? I link to it in my newsletter, which dives into the finances of public media companies across the world. The appendices are particularly helpful if you're trying to get a handle for how all of it works. Phil Riley wrote a rather fine blog post about what privatising BBC Radio would mean. It would, in a nutshell, mean significant cuts in programming, cuts of 60% to their budget, and the move would also plunge commercial radio broadcasters into significant loss because there's not enough radio revenue to go round. Phil Riley was also on the media show this week on the BBC talking about that exact thing. Not that Andrew Rossindale would have heard it, since it's on BBC Radio 4. But in short, losing the BBC's funding would be a disaster for radio, and that would be rather stupid. I hope it doesn't happen. Other things I noticed this week. The largest commercial radio broadcaster in the UK, Global, released their accounts. Matt Deegan spotted that radio turnover dipped by 15%, but outdoor, which is actually a bigger business for them, outdoor drops by 2/3. Ouch. Who would be an outdoor advertising company these days? Here's a nice drinking game for you. Take a sip every time somebody launches into a spirited defence of the BBC with the caveat, it's not perfect, but... you'll be drunk very, very quickly, I would have thought. I linked to an almost lazy Buggles headline covering radio in South Devon. Let's remind myself of what that said. It was tweeted by Laughing Radio DJ, And yes, it was a piece that Richard Harding, who is Laughing Radio DJ, had written for South Hams newspapers on the local radio scene in South Devon. It's quite a funny read, so it's worth a peek. So thank you for the Almost Lazy Buggles headline, which of course said video didn't kill the radio star. But even so. Last year, for the first time, consumption of current songs fell. So, top 40 radio. Hello. MRC data says that has fallen, and I noticed that Larry Rosin has also written something relatively similar from Edison Research's own data, which is worth a read as well. Public radio in the US appears to be having a talent drain. Eric Newsom suggests it's because public radio is, well, frankly, giving up. And not really doing an awful lot. It's a good Twitter thread that I'll link to there. I also linked to a newsletter from Tom Webster on why podcasting is doing so well against spoken word radio in the US. Certainly, it's a fascinating read. Also, a nice Twitter stream, or Twitter thread, I should say, from someone who posts about his time at Radio 5 Live Sport, James West. Hello, James West. And how they coped with FA Cup Day. It's a little bit different from my time on Pennine FM Sport, when I was one of two people whose job it was to cart up sports reports from people at the end of telephone lines, and also from the good folks at LBC. But absolutely fascinating about all of the complicated technology that they have these days. I'm sounding very old now. Radio presenter Bert Weiss gets his voice synthetically cloned so that he can do more work. No, absolutely, seriously, which is quite a thing. What difference does DAB bring to a typical radio listener? DAB, of course, being the broadcast of choice in many European countries and here in Australia as well. Well, I linked to a video of 134 stations on one person's radio in South London. Hello, Ian Dealey. I used to get about 110 when I lived in London in N14. I asked who can beat that. A little spoiler for next week's newsletter. Sally has emailed me from somewhere in Belgium or Holland. No, Belgium. Yes, Belgium. And said that she gets 190. 190 radio stations on a radio. It's pretty impressive. I linked to Matt Deegan again, great, posting a decent radio station video from Absolute Radio. I posted Radio 1's offerings for comparison, which is really rather worse. And in fact, all of the BBC's video out of their radio stations are all pretty dreadful. And I wonder why that is. I wonder why the BBC doesn't take radio seriously in terms of video. Peter Frampton thinks that video killed the radio star. Which is nice. He tweeted that last week. So it's probably okay not to send him any more music royalties then. That's probably okay. And finally, I link to the rather beautiful new home for Radio-Canada in Montreal. It looks to have shifted down the road a little bit, closer to town, which must be a good thing. It also looks significantly flatter. I bet they'll miss the elevators. But it looks very, very nice. Lots of glass and everything else. So congratulations to Radio-Canada. I have many friends there, and I hope you enjoy your brand new building, which you moved into apparently a couple of weeks ago, which is all very nice. Thank you to Ash Elford, who seems to hold down an astonishing array of jobs and keeps many DAB radio stations on air across the UK, for buying me some lovely coffee at buymeacoffee.com/James Cridland. Thank you also to Richard Hilton and to James Masterton and Brun Audio Consulting for your ongoing support of this newsletter and podcast. I'm very grateful to you. If you'd like to support my work in any way, you can buy me a coffee. Buymeacoffee.com/James Cridland is where to go. You can become a member to give regularly or just give a one-off coffee or 5. I link to, obviously, that. I've just read out the address twice already, but there we are. I link to that in my newsletter, which is at james.crid.land, in case you haven't yet worked it out. My professional website has more details about who I am and what I do and whether I can help you further. That's at james.cridland.net. And really delighted to be speaking again. I'm looking forward to being at Podcast Movement Evolutions in Los Angeles in March. Haven't been asked to speak there, but I will be there. And who knows, I normally get roped into something at the last minute. So that should be fun. Looking forward to getting on a plane And in fact, I just booked my seats. I just made sure that I'm in the right seats for my flights. So very much looking forward to that, and crossing my fingers and hoping that I get the upgrade. So I'm not next to dirty other people. Also, looking forward to being at Radio Days Europe in Malmö in Sweden in May, trying to pronounce that correctly. The podcast show in London also in May, and Canadian Music Week in June. Radio Days Europe will have lots for you if you are a podcaster. But also I'm looking forward to doing something about radio technology, particularly where it comes in front of the internet. So that I'm busy talking to the organisers about, but that should be quite fun. I may get myself a significant speaking gig there. So here's hoping. And Canadian Music Week in June should be fun too. That should be a keynote followed by a panel. I don't think any of these people have announced any of this yet. I probably shouldn't be telling you. But anyway, that's the vague plan. So more details on that soon, but very much looking forward to getting back on the road. It should be fun to sort all of that out. And in fact, I've had to buy myself a new ESTA to get into the US, so that's all good. I need to work out closer to the date what I need to do in terms of certificates for COVID and all of this malarkey. So that should all be fun, but it's a welcome return to a little bit of normality. So very much looking forward to that. And that's basically it from this. Thank you for listening, and until next time, keep listening.